here to speak about how blockchain technology can be used by companies to manage music rights is Cédric Cobban. Cédric is an entrepreneur who's interested in Austrian economics. I'm saying this the second time today, and I still don't know what it means. But there we go, business and investing. And his interest started with Bitcoin in 2011. And then onwards, he was involved in multiple crypto 2.0 projects. He's the president and co-founder of Peertracks, an interactive music streaming and retail platform. And it's a one-stop shop for artists to get discovered, engage their fans, and monetize their music. Cédric, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you. For those of you that were at the other panel, it's going to sound very similar, so apologies for you guys, but I will not feel bad if you look at your phones. For the rest of you, please pay attention. This is really cool. So we're going to step away from the abstract. So this morning we had really cool presentations by Sean that went into the general overview of what blockchains are, what smart contracts are. So we'll dive into the use case. I'll be using Muse, the blockchain we built, as an example for how this is using the blockchain technology to change the way the entire music stack actually functions, the economy, the distribution, and the royalty payments. So overview would be, we'll see what exactly this blockchain is, as far as it acting as a database, a means of payment. Then the very strange part is, how does it actually become the source of those funds? Then we'll tackle the usual question, which is, how do you trust the content that's on there? So I'll just explain the two methods we are personally using on there. And finally, more of a little call to action, I guess, so how you can actually help out in this ecosystem. So Muse is a database for all of the metadata that you would have on a song. So if you're a musician or a creator of music, you will put the title, the length of the song, who's your producer, who's your label, composer, lyricist. All of that information is currently stored on a blockchain. With Muse, yeah, but in the current system, all that information is normally stored in silos of information. So you'll have about 70 to 80 big databases that are not in sync together. When there's a change made somewhere, it doesn't propagate. There's jurisdictions, specific jurisdictions, there's different formats. So the obvious use case for a blockchain is to have this one central place for the actual content to rest. You have one place to search, and you have one place to update. So it helps both sides, both the people that are trying to look for content and those that are pushing out content. The maintenance is kind of the Wikipedia style. So when Wikipedia came out, they were saying, this is crazy. You cannot let the world just update your encyclopedia. All you'll get is spam. But they kind of proved the model wrong. Wikipedia is now much, much, much better than when it originally started. People used to say, don't trust Wikipedia, it's full of garbage. Now there's more and more reputable sources updating it, quoting it, and whatnot. So I'll explain a little bit deeper how that actual curation that's open to the world functions. Then as far as Muse goes, everything updates in real time. So blocks take about 3 seconds. So if you do make a change, you don't have to wait for the other company to sync up and try to figure out how both the databases talk to each other and eventually make the change. So the second an artist actually makes a change, it propagates and nobody has to update their database. It's done automatically. This brings us to the next point, which is platforms don't have an excuse to not pay the correct people. So if there is a global blockchain that holds all of the content, and you're still paying the royalties to the wrong musician, say an artist died and the rights went to his heir or his label, and you're still paying the wrong person, that accumulates into a black box. That's what they call it in the music space. Just tons of funds, essentially, where you weren't able to match who am I supposed to pay. Those funds should go to somebody, but right now people are just sitting, there's a bunch of entities that are sitting on a whole bunch of funds that don't really want to figure out who exactly these are supposed to go to. So with a system like this, you have no excuse to be paying for 6 months the wrong person. It's propagated instantly, and even if you have been paying the wrong person, it's an immutable ledger of history. So you can see all the transactions that should have gone to the other people. So it's very easy to account for how much you actually owe the correct person. The smart contracts on Muse, so that's all the regular stuff that you would put in a music database, so all the copyright information. What's more specific to the Muse blockchain would be the management. So every single song uploaded is actually a smart contract that contains the metadata plus who manages that actual smart contract. So if you want to update a typo, who can do that? If you want to change the recipient of royalties, who has the right to do that change? And then there's the royalty payment split. So it's not the same people that are managing that are the recipients, and it might not be all the participants that are the recipients. These are all three separate fields. So we'll go a little bit into detail as to how that part actually works with a concrete example. So we'll step away a bit from the abstract and go straight to what the rights management portal would do. This would be a front end, so a website that you access through your browser, so Chrome, Firefox, whatever. So you don't need to be a programmer or know what cryptocurrency is. You just show up to a website, and if you can use a keyboard and a mouse, you're good. Once you're there, you just create your account. When you create that account, it doesn't go to our company. It doesn't go to a company at all. So your username and password, they're actually going to the blockchain directly. We're just the portal that allows you to do that as a musician. So that's one thing. This would be the first time that the musician can actually have direct control over his rights, and he owns it and controls it himself. There's no third party involved. Once you've created your account, you simply upload your song, put in the content. This, by the way, I'm just talking about a manual use case, someone who shows up and does it manually, but you could always port in databases from different companies that have a whole bunch of artists. But the easiest to understand is just if you were somebody that just created content as a DJ, and voila, you just sign up and just put all your information there. Once you build your smart contract, it includes who receives royalty splits, so that's different from the participants, because maybe the artists are dead, but somebody else has the rights to it. And then the management. The management is very, very important so that the rest of the industry can still connect up to it. So if we were making just a platform that only new people could use, you'll hit a wall eventually. But if you make it general enough so that established companies can say, I want to port in 1,000 songs and I want to be the manager. I've always been managing them since the 70s. The recipients can all be inputted in all the different smart contracts, but they're all managed by this one law firm. And vice versa, if you're that solo DJ, you might own everything, you might manage everything, and you might be the recipient to all the royalties. Or if you're a band, say, you could be 4 people, we each have 25% say in the management, but maybe the rights are split differently. We could require multi-signature. So there's an actual threshold to what's required to make a change. If we have 4 band members and 3 of them are always drunk, then you might, give all permissions to the one responsible one, or you might have some kind of 4 out of 4. Everybody has to agree we're selling our rights, or maybe just 3 out of 4 has to agree, etc. So it's very fine. You can fine-tune exactly how you manage everything. From either a big corporation to a sole proprietor. And finally, when I mentioned the Wikipedia part, proposed edits is what we have. So it's kind of like a proposed transaction on a blockchain. What that is, essentially, if you are a creator, you just log in and you find any single song that you belong to. Say I'm a drummer and I find one of my songs, I'm not in there. I can edit myself in. Anybody can edit anybody in any smart contract. I could tweak the royalties, I could change the name, that was clearly a typo, and this notifies the managers of the smart contract, whether it's the round table thing or the firm or the sole proprietor. This person gets a notification that says, hey, Bob says he actually was the drummer for this song, and you can approve or decline that change. So it can be globally curated, but those that get the notification that this happened is actually the manager. So there's no overarching entity that edits every single entry in the database. Every database entry is managed by the actual rights holders or their representatives. All right. So there's a lot of ways you could use Muse as a streaming platform. You don't have to be all or nothing. You could still maintain your own database. So Apple has its own music database. They maintain that database. How they could use this if they're not ready to switch to this startup experiment, you could use it as a cross-reference. So anytime there's a change on the public global blockchain of music, you should get a notification that says, hey, check your stuff, because the right holder might have changed. And if you want to avoid very costly lawsuits, and that's pretty much how the music world works right now, is just lawsuits, 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 you best stay on top of if there's any change globally that happens. So that's one way you could use it. The second way would be to actually use it as your own database. So instead of just cross-referencing it and maintaining your own, you would eliminate your entire database, no more management costs and all that. Just use Muse. Use the free peer-to-peer blockchain that exists, that's up to date and in sync, and just use that. You don't need to use it for payments. You can still pay people in the exact same way you were using before. Wire transfer, checks, PayPal, use the method you want. But at least with this method, you know who to pay globally, and it's always in sync. So if we look at the little graphics here, the top is just who to pay, and below is just how you do it. The little Tetris-y L shape, that would be the streaming platform. It has its spin data. It knows exactly what its users have been listening to, and it knows exactly who to pay for those songs. Each song is associated to a smart contract with the recipients. And then it just picks, performing rights organizations, or it could even use Muse if it wants, or legacy banking system. The other method would be to use it as both means of payment and who to pay as well. So who to pay and how to pay. That can be done, and it would benefit the artist greatly, because the speed at which they get paid would be, you'd have a nice edge over your competitor as a streaming platform. So same little graphic, who to pay up top. You have the streaming platform. It is using Muse. It's not maintaining its own database. It's not maintaining its costly servers for that. And you have your own spin history. But you use Muse, it's a blockchain, so it's perfect for funneling value globally instantly. That's the first use of a blockchain was Bitcoin, and it was just store value and send from address to address. In our case, Muse has no transaction fees, so it's perfect for the music world, because we're talking micro penny, in the fractions of a penny. So you could have your funds that you've collected from your advertisers, from your subscription fees, and you know who to pay, and you send those funds through the payment rails that is the blockchain. The final way, so we've seen each and every one, the final way is the much, much stranger way that requires a whole bunch of explanation, and questions will probably arise from that. It's to use Muse as not only the who and how, but as the source. And looks similar to the previous point, but I'll explain one key difference. You have all the shareholders of Muse, anybody that holds that token, is essentially, this is an analogy, it's not a legal standing, but you're essentially like a shareholder of the entity. You decide what happens with the new inflation. Muse creates new tokens every day, exactly like how every 10 minutes there's 12.5 Bitcoin in creation. Same exact principle. Most blockchains work like that. Only who gets those tokens. In Bitcoin, the ones that get the tokens are the miners. Not every miner, but only the one that solved the mathematical equation. He receives his 12.5 Bitcoin. That's a lot of value if you're one guy receiving that. With Muse, we send the royalties, right? So like that 12.5 Bitcoin, we send those royalties to the smart contracts that have been listened to today, or in the last hour, or in a certain time period. So with this little slide that we see up here, you have Muse as the database, you have the platform, which was elected by the shareholders to say, yes, We trust you, you're transparent enough, you're bringing a whole bunch of attention to the network. We trust you to report your playing to Muse. And Muse will send the payments directly into the artists' wallets. So nobody ever touches funds. No human is ever touching any income. No company is holding on to funds. No banking system is funneling the funds anywhere. They're pretty much spawned in your wallet. Muse just creates new inflation in your wallet based on the spin history. Hope that makes sense. So the question that normally arises is, okay, but how do you know that these new tokens coming into existence to pay royalties, how do you know they're going to the correct people? All Muse knows is that this smart contract was listened to 5 times and it sent the equivalent of 5 royalty payments. How do you know the person that created that is the actual artist? Well, you don't really. What you have to do is have a system that it tries to identify participants. You can do this through a bunch of methods. 2 that are already baked into the system are whitelisting and scoring. So whitelisting is, we didn't have to reinvent the wheel. It already exists. That's what all the tech companies are doing. So if a celebrity, say Elon Musk, posts something, you want to know if you're actually following Elon Musk. So what these services provide is a little badge that they give the celebrity. They verify the identity. They already do that. If you put your music up on Spotify, they are sending you a request. Prove to me that you are, who you say you are. It takes 2 weeks to actually get your music up on Spotify. For the badges on Twitter and Facebook, same thing. You have to prove your identity for them to put the little check mark next to your account. The only difference is that these entities, Facebook controls the Facebook database, Twitter controls the Twitter database, obviously. The difference with Muse is that the Facebook account, say, or the Universal Music account, or the Music Law Firm Inc. account, they can put the badge next to every user. So every user can rate every user. Not rate, but click yes or no. So in this case, if you're not sure that your musician is the correct person, you look who verified him. Oh, Twitter verified him, Facebook verified him, the law firm verified him, and Spotify also verified him. So you have multiple layers. There's not just this one entity on Muse. There is no Muse verification. A blockchain cannot verify an identity yet. There's projects. There are a bunch of projects working on that, and that's its own animal. But we could simply use a system that's already in use, which is the whitelisting proposition. So every single Muse account can rate any single Muse account. It's up to the platform to decide which ones you trust. Do I trust the law firm? Do I trust Twitter? Do I trust only the contracts or the users that have been trusted by both? You can be as strict or as loose as you want. It really doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, it's the streaming platform that's providing the music to people. They're on the hook. If they're paying the wrong people and they don't verify and they don't care who is verified or not, well, you're opening up yourself for lawsuits. So this system also has no central point of failure as the Facebook method would. If somebody, not saying it would be easy to do, but if somebody goes into Facebook and removes the badge from one person and adds it to another person, that's one database to hack, and that's the entire trust relies off of that badge. In this case, if you were to hack one user and remove your badge or add a badge, you would have to do it for every single other entity. All right? And it's not like 100% of trust would disappear from one hack. The honeypot is divided, essentially. And let's see, that exact whitelisting mechanism can also be used to blacklist. This is not a protocol level censorship, all right? There's no censorship in an open, trustless database blockchain. But what you could do is have either a watchdog entity or a Europol entity or an IP enforcement agency entity. What they do is they find content that's obviously bad and they just put their little check next to it. And companies could just filter those out. Your front end, your streaming platform could say, I trust the Apple, I trust all of these ones, and if the watchdog put a check next to it, I ignore it completely. That's method one. Method two is scoring. There's a method that's, okay, so everybody, probably the guys in the audience that have Facebook might have had a friend request by this super hot woman, and her, her description is just, only want sex, here's an email. Okay, don't click that link. It's not a real person. And these are obvious, but some of them are a little bit more subtle. And you have to look at their friends. Do they have friends? Have they liked anything? Have they posted anything? And that social graph is difficult to fake. But there are islands. You can create, a botnet can create 1,000 accounts, and they all like each other and like their own posts, and then it's harder to tell. You can tell, but it requires much more due diligence. So why it's called an island is because all the humans are interacting with each other, and the bot is just an island, and the only friends connecting the two are like those 3 guys, bro gym guys that have liked, that have friended that super hot model. So the way we go around that issue is to make our social graph stake weighted. By stake weighted, I mean it counts your cryptocurrency that you have in your wallet. A botnet would have to buy up cryptocurrency. So let me backtrack a second. The first thing we look at scoring is how much cryptocurrency you have in your wallet. So say I have 10 Muse, right? My score, to keep it simple, would be 10. So the odds that I'm not a bot have just increased a little bit. He's probably a human because he has actual tangible value behind him. Now, instead of just counting the links, we count the actual cryptocurrency in the wallet of your connections. So I get a portion of of my first layer connections. So if you also have 10, then we look at 25%, then now my scoring is 12.5. And then the scoring also looks as his connections for a smaller ratio. So my scoring could end up being something like 14 if I only have a friend that has a friend. So the scoring is very dynamic as far as it's hard to game it. You can't create an island of bots unless you fund it millions of dollars. So not only is it difficult to create a social graph, but now you have to pay to create a social graph. So it's very easy to, it's harder to actually exploit the system in this sense. So when you have a Britney Spears show up and you want to know if it's Britney Spears, well, she will probably be linked to a big label that has a whole bunch of, a huge reputation, because that label is linked to a whole bunch of artists that have a whole bunch of money in their accounts. So you can tell just by the scoring that this is probably the correct person. And then you have the whitelisting and blacklisting. That's another mechanism to say, okay, odds are this is Britney Spears, look at that. There's all of these accounts, all these entities saying it is, and she's linked with them, and her scoring is off the charts. So this is kind of one of the ways Ethereum has a proof of physical address, and how they do it is quite interesting. They say, send me some Ether, send me some money with a mailing address, and I'll send you a postcard. And there's a PIN number on it. If you type in the correct PIN number, voila, I've just identified your identity. I don't know anything else about you, but this service has vouched for that mailing address tied to this Ethereum address. You could have the exact same thing here, where a business model would be send me $5, or an agency, an IP agency could say, we're doing it on the taxpayer dime, just send us your credentials. I will link to you, and you'll get my scoring, and I will whitelist you. So this would be one way to verify that at least the EUIPO or the agent or anybody else could have a system like this where, okay, I trust them, and I trust this other agency, and I trust that other agency, and I will stream no other content other than those that have been vouched for by credible entities. So what we're doing, there's a question that often comes up with piracy. Would this make piracy easier? Would this make it harder? Are you trying to encrypt things so that they're not, it's easy to use? This is a weird answer, but we're actually trying to give pirates legal jobs that pay more. Okay, so imagine if you had to fight pirates or just give them a job that's legit. This is what our system proposes to do, where if you put yourself in the pirate shoes, you're building a little website, okay? And you have to have really shady advertisers, shady sponsors, and you can't really scale up your business model. You're giving viruses to everybody. You're very limited, and you're kind of ensuring that the artist doesn't get paid. Or you have a system that's just an open system you can plug in, right? Now, all of a sudden, everybody can listen to the music that they're trying to get to. They're reaching it without having to jump through hoops. You just plug into the API of the blockchain and voila. So it's legal. The royalties are being paid automatically and transparently. You can even prove to the users that those musicians that are being streamed are being paid. You could just open up a block explorer and see that your listening habits have generated royalty income. Why would you start a torrenting site if you could just plug into that for an easier time, you'll scale even better. So we're not necessarily trying to fight piracy, we're just trying to give them a job that actually pays everybody and everybody wins out of it. So that'd be one thing. This is why I'm talking about the ounce of prevention equals a pound of cure. So the budget that could be going into fighting piracy could actually be going into giving them legitimate jobs so that piracy becomes why the hell would I do that? It's similar to the war on drugs where, a lot of problems come from the fact that it's almost impossible, it's easier to make a living, to make $1,000 selling drugs on the streets than it would be to actually have a legit company that can sell drugs. The problem is elsewhere. If you gave them the opportunity to become like a Budweiser, you wouldn't have this giant budget fighting crime and fighting, trying to stop this whole thing. You could just make sure they're well regulated, don't sell to kids, and make sure you ID people, and voila. So this is kind of a weird parallel, and I just kind of made it up on the spot, so it's not that developed. But okay, yeah, I got 3 minutes. So that would be basically the business model. Just if piracy can be prevented by giving them a better job, you could divert resources into making sure the smart contracts are correct, the artists are the legitimate people, and you could even be one of the curators. You could have an office full, instead of fighting crime, you could just have a whole bunch of office making sure the smart contracts are correct. There's an error here, propose the edit, fix the typo, put the right person, and then the recipient will get it and approve or decline the change. And I think that's it. I kind of covered from A to Z how the whole thing works.
A very quick question. You mentioned the ability to request a change in the metadata, like, I was the drummer on that song, for example. Does that data, let's assume you make a request and it's rejected, does that data, those transactions get recorded on the blockchain?
Yes, so the transactions are all on blockchain. Every proposed transaction will be logged, but the smart contract itself wouldn't be modified.
Right, got it, okay.
Well, I just couldn't. I'm Charlotte Söderlund Björk from Sweden, having some clients, actually rock groups and so on. And you said that there are lots of litigations going on, and this could be one way of solving it. I just want to mention I don't think that, because they will still litigate whether they were musicians for hire, whether they are part of the work that has been created, and so on. So that is just a point made. It's not going to be that simple.
Yeah, no, for sure. The point is that a lot of the lawsuits and litigations that come out are from murky data. So a lot of times they're paying the wrong people for a long time, or they're holding on to funds that were not clear. So just by having a new clean system, this is why they funded the GRD. They were trying to get a global database. The issue why that failed is that there was a whole bunch of infighting. Who's going to control it? Can you get charged for it? Who's going to fund it and maintain it? The blockchain takes the GRD idea and just removes the problems into why it failed. And there's nobody in charge. It's a public utility. So they would definitely still have litigations. There'll be arguments all the time. It starts from inception. A lot of deals are made on napkins. Like they'll compose something in a bar, like, oh, this is amazing. And then one of them produced it, not thinking that the other person wanted to be in. And there's a lawsuit. Blockchains can't fix that. Nothing can fix that. But you can mitigate a lot of it by just having a clear source of truth.
But the problem here is that it is the producer of recording that is reporting to the collecting society the neighboring rights, what the musicians were hired, what they have contributed, and already there you have a lot of errors they forget. Or they
In the reporting itself?
So, I mean, that's, yeah. So I just wanted to alert for that.
Right. So just one, I don't know if I have time, but one quick little thing about that would be the fact that the platforms are elected to be a streaming platform that gets subsidies from the blockchain means that their biggest expense can be subsidized. But shareholders of the actual Muse entity are not just going to pick anybody to do that because they might just throw the funds at their cousin. You have stake, you have something to lose. So there will be competition as to who can provide the most transparent model in providing the best source of raw data. Or there's also another modification for an embedded streaming player that's directly on Muse. There is no humans doing the reporting to Muse. It would be the Muse user that has Muse tokens, which is allowed a certain limit of streams per day, depending on his balance. And that means there is no reporting done. It's when he clicks play on the app, this counts as a spin for that Muse ID, that Muse account. So there definitely are ways around that. And there are some things that cannot be changed through this technology, but a lot of it can.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Cédric. Thanks.